Hey everyone, welcome back to another weapon analysis video. Version 6.2, or Luna 3, is releasing 3 new weapons in this patch. 2 of them being Gacha 5 stars, and the third being a free event weapon. We'll be covering what these weapons do, who can best use them, and any sort of niche workarounds you can consider trying out. Quick reminder that this video is not a meta-oriented or damage calculation review. We're mainly talking about which units can mechanically use it best. In the same vein, while I'll share some tips and ideas on how to best utilize the weapon passives, not every tip is going to be optimal or meta. My description has additional information, links, and credits. Captions are available if you need them. And without further ado, let's get started. The 5-star gacha weapons are going to have passives related to the new Hexenzirkel faction mechanic. As a quick summary of this, some Mondstadt characters are going to become Hexen characters. The current list of Hexen units are Durin, Venti, Mona, Albedo, Krai, Sucrose, Razor, and Fischl. If at least 2 of these characters are in the party, you'll activate the special Hexenzirkel passive, which can enable special effects for both the characters and the upcoming weapons. The first weapon is Durin's signature 5-star sword called Athame Artis. It has a 608 base attack and a 33.1% crit rate substat. For its passive, it has an unconditional 16% burst crit damage bonus from the get-go. Additionally, when an elemental burst hits an enemy, you'll gain 2 effects. 1, the user is going to get a 20% attack bonus. 2, if the user is off-field, they keep the 20% attack bonus, but the current active character also gets a 16% attack bonus. If you have the Hexen passive enabled, the effects are increased by 75%, which equals a 35% attack bonus for the user and a 28% attack bonus for the active character. Both effects can last for 3 seconds and can proc while the user is off-field. Having a mid-level base attack and crit rate substat, this sword is a good all-around stat stick for any damage dealer. The extra burst crit damage bonus makes it stand out a bit better among burst damage focused units. Looking purely at the damage stats, Ayaka and Skirk stand out the most. A majority of Ayaka's damage from a rotation stems from her burst. As for Skirk, this weapon makes best use if she's played in her burst mode. Any other DPS can still use this for the attack and crit, though they benefit slightly less if their burst damage isn't their main source. Durin is the clear best option since he can make use of both the damage stats and the support aspect of the passive. Additionally, he's going to be a Hexen character, making it much easier for him to contribute and proc the extra attack bonus. For other units who can proc the attack bonus, keep in mind that they can't contribute to the Hexen passive. You're either going to have to settle for a baseline attack buff, or you have to run 2 other Hexen characters to proc the effect. Our best alternate units are characters who naturally build into damage stats, are off-field units, and also have decently long uptime on their burst. Xingqiu and Lynette are the first 2 options to come to mind, as they fulfill the role of an off-field burst unit with good uptime on the passive. Both Electro and Dendro Travelers specialize in their burst being a main part of their damage source, which also makes it a good option for them. Krai is also someone who can use his burst a lot, though his uptime can vary depending on the enemies you face. At C2, his burst duration can be extended, but only if you're defeating enemies. If you aren't actively defeating enemies, his burst duration is only going to last for around 8 seconds, which makes the passive uptime 11 seconds. But if you are defeating enemies, his burst can last up to 15 seconds, allowing for around 18 seconds of the passive uptime. For the next list of users, there are characters who can easily proc the attack bonus, but these are also support characters who make less use of the damage stats. The main units here are Kazuha and Layla. Both have lingering bursts that can trigger the attack bonus consistently, but are also going to be less likely to maximize the crit rate and burst damage effects. Now, under 2 conditions, you can try out this niche technique that is probably not optimal, but is still going to be a neat thing to try out. First condition, your team contains attack scalers who do snapshot. 2, the sword user proccing the effect uses their bursts before the snapshotters use their abilities. If you start a rotation with the sword user doing their burst hits, they can swap into snapshotting units who can gain the on-field attack bonus. Even when they swap off, they'll keep the stats for the duration of their abilities. Every unit I mentioned earlier can use this technique, but a special unique case for this method is Ayato. Despite being someone who is an on-fielder and doesn't build for burst damage, he is still a DPS with high uptime on his burst. He's also a unit who starts off the rotation using his burst, which means during your setup, you'll have characters taking turns getting an attack bonus. On screen, I'm just showing an example rotation to show the idea. I have Ayato, Xiangling, and Fischl. Start with Ayato's burst to proc the attack bonus. When you swap to Xiangling, she'll be the active unit and get the attack bonus. Then she'll snapshot her burst. When Fischl summons Oz, the same thing occurs. When you come back to Ayato, he still keeps the 20% attack bonus, while Xiangling and Fischl can keep the 16% bonus, even if they're off-field. The next weapon is the new 5-star bow and a new Venti signature, Daybreak Chronicles. Daybreak Chronicles, why do I keep misreading these damn names? It has a 674 base attack and a 44.1% crit damage bonus. And here is how the passive works. When you start combat, the user is going to have a 60% damage bonus to normal attack, skill, and burst damage. Every second, the bonus will decrease by 10%. Dealing normal attack, skill, and burst damage increases the corresponding bonuses by 10%, until it reaches a 60% cap. If you have the Hexenzirkel passive active, the bonus is increased by 20% instead of 10%, and it increases all of the damage types, not just the corresponding one. This weapon is also off-field friendly. The way it works is that you're constantly decreasing your bonus. To maximize your bonus, you want to be dealing damage that outpaces the loss. And because the decrease rate is constantly occurring, your average bonus might be closer to 40 or 50%. But with the Hexen passive enabled, you have a much easier time keeping the bonus at its 60% limit because the increase rate is doubled, and because the damage increase will contribute universally instead of corresponding to the specific damage type. With this being Venti's new signature, we can look at how he benefits from this. In a non-Hexen team, he's more of a general burst DPS. While it's active, his burst will easily maintain a 60% cap, but the rest of his damage types will likely stay at 0% due to the lack of uptime. With his Hexenzirkel buffs, he takes on a strong on-fielding role, allowing him to infuse his normal attacks with Anemo. You have sources of normal attacks and burst damage keeping max stacks on the passive very consistently, but with it also being able to buff all the damage types, even Venti's skill, which can only be used once every 6 seconds, can benefit from the full damage bonus. For other characters, this weapon works better on attack scalers due to its high base attack, but its 44% crit damage subset still works universally as a stat stick. For the damage bonus, however, it's going to be much harder to maintain this buff, especially if you don't have a Hexen team to proc the additional bonuses. For one of the best alternative users, Fischl is going to utilize this weapon pretty easily. Her elemental skill, A4, and C6 are all considered skill damage, allowing her to specialize directly into this damage type. Putting her in a Hexen team just makes the bonus a lot easier to max out and maintain, but even in solo comps, the rate of skill damage is really quick, and will still have an easy time maintaining. It's an overall great option for her. For other units, there's a couple caveats to consider. Keep in mind that we are going to be going down this list with the assumption that you're not running some kind of Hexen team. If you do plan to run a Hexen team with any of these characters, then the rest of this section can basically be ignored. In non-Hexen teams, however, you want to pick units who not only deal a specific type of damage, but also can deal fast instances of said damage. The bonus is decreasing every second, so you need to pick units who can outdo the rate for a net positive. In other words, units who deal more than one instance of their corresponding damage every second. Any less, and you end up with a net 0 or negative rate, making the damage bonus stuck at 0%. For normal attack characters, I have Tartaglia, Yoimiya, and Aloy. All three of them should be able to proc the normal attack bonus at a positive rate by default. But as a bit of a spitball idea, attack speed bonuses might make it easier for these characters to gather stacks, as it would allow them to deal more hits within a 1-second window. I would predict Yoimiya gains the bonus easier, because Child's melee hits have hit lag, and Aloy's autos are a bit clunky and really slow. There aren't any skill damage units besides Fischl who can easily proc this passive, so we'll just move into burst damage. For burst damage, Yelan can easily max out the bonus, as she can deal 3 instances of her dice's hits every second. While she can make use of the damage bonus very easily, She has HP scaling, which is slightly less synergistic with a higher base attack. A DPS build for Krai can also be a decent option. As long as you trigger her A4 passive correctly, her burst can last for 9 seconds, and it attacks twice every second. This means you get a net positive of 10% every second, but by the 6-second mark, she should be hitting and maintaining the limit fairly consistently. The final weapon is going to be the new 4-star event bow, Rainbow Serpent's Rainbow. It has a 510 base attack with a 45.9% ER substat. For its passive, the user's attack is increased by 28 to 56% for 8 seconds when they hit an opponent from off-field. So this weapon is a pretty good option for anyone who functions as an off-field DPS, right? Sorta? The thing with the Gay Snake Rainbow is that it's an attack bonus, and attack bonuses are one of the stats that might consider snapshotting. For example, you might think about Venti when he plays his regular burst playstyle, but that wouldn't affect his burst because it snapshots. For some of the more expected users, you can run this weapon on Auroron. His A1 passive is his main source of damage, which is also an off-field source. It's also worth noting that his A1 isn't considered as skill or burst damage, but is instead an unlabeled electro damage instance. So the only stats that can buff it are electro damage, crit, and attack. The other character this will work with is Yehoda. Her skill and burst are both really good off-field damage sources, and are both attack scaling. Yehoda is also an attack scaling healer, so this bonus helps to buff 2 avenues of her utility. Right now, I am under the assumption that she is going to be a unit who doesn't snapshot, so the weapon passive should boost her damage. Now, these next 2 characters are off-fielders who do snapshot, but they can use some rotation swapping methods to get the buff for their damage. First option is Fischl. Her skill, A4, and C6 damage all snapshot based on the moment that Oz was summoned, but she also has the ability to reposition Oz, which will re-snapshot her stats. You can summon Oz, swap off-field, get the buff, swap back in, and re-summon Oz to snapshot the bonus. In a lot of teams, however, Fischl's sources of off-field damage do occur consistently throughout the rotation, allowing it to refresh the bow's passive. This means that in the second rotation onward, Fischl might have the buff refreshed, and as long as she has it refreshed, she doesn't need to use a swapping method when you summon Oz again. Krai can also use a swap mechanic, but this is also a bit less comfortable for her, so I don't really recommend it. You can cast her skill to start the animation of her boomerang. While it's swinging around, swap off and get the attack bonus when it comes around and hits an enemy. Her main source of damage is in her burst, so you can cast it when she swaps back in, which will snapshot the attack buff. Unlike Fischl, however, Krai has front-loaded particle generation, which means this method prevents her from catching her own particles, increasing her ER needs. So it's a good thing this weapon has an ER stat, huh? Overall, I'm actually really surprised at how niche the weapon is. Despite a good amount of bow users being able to proc the off-field effect, it's not that easy to utilize on a lot of them because of the factor of snapshotting. Only 2 units can easily proc the effect, while the other 2 have to work around their snapshotting in order to best utilize. Anyway, that's gonna do it for this video. Personally speaking, as someone who has been highly anticipating Durin for a very long time, I am planning to go for his signature. And as someone who already has Venti built as a DPS, I'm also gonna go for his new signature. But what about you guys? Are you planning to go for any of these new weapons? If so, who do you plan to use it on? Let me know down below. If you enjoyed this video, consider leaving a like and subscribe to support the channel. Thank you all for watching, everyone, and I will see you all next time. Bye!